What a weekend it's been for the Queen.
Well, here with the latest is our royal editor, Camilla Tominey, and so, well, I mean, she's looked amazing this
She really has.
Top form, hasn't she?
Absolutely,
Really
sort of front and forward for the country.
Yes.
But let's start with what was a sort of bigger, more probably controversial story. It was the fact that she's reportedly decided to ditch her never complain, never explain policy.
Yeah, this was in the Mail on Sunday, and I think it's born out of this row that we witnessed last week with regard to whether she had given her permission for the Sussex's baby to be called Lilibet, or just been asked, or just been told, not asked, but told. And Buckingham Palace were kind of pushing against this idea that Harry and Meghan had effectively asked her permission when they said they hadn't really. They just informed her that the baby had been born and that's what they were calling her. And I think we're getting into this situation where, although that mantra exists, and it exists to protect the royals as much as anyone else, because they don't want to continually have to kind of confront tittle-tattle, but they are voiceless in the sense that Harry and Meghan can go on podcasts or Oprah Winfrey or whatever and make accusations. The Queen's never going to give a sit-down interview, and the other royals do it quite rarely, and therefore they don't really have a right of reply apart from via the press office. And I think the press office point of view is, why are people in America or kind of unofficial spokespeople on Twitter sort of speaking on behalf of the Queen when they've got no authority to do so, nor do they really know what she's thinking? I mean, even from my journalistic perspective, you've always got to be very careful. Like, editors quite like to get, you know, headlines surrounding Queen furious about or Queen upset by. And you have to push back on that a bit because, A, HM doesn't really do fury, and B, you know, we can't really speak on her behalf. And I think there's this sense that they're just trying to push back on this idea of people speaking for her in LA. If anyone's going to speak for her, let it be her own palace aides and officials.
Sure.
And I think we can appreciate that.
Will this change things quite drastically, do you think?
I don't think so, because you're not going to get pushed back on stories that they feel are frivolous. But at the same time, this issue with the name, I think she probably does want it to be known that it wasn't as if she was consulted, just that she was told. And we can all extrapolate from that whether we think she was delighted by the news or not. Obviously, it's a really personal nickname that was used by her grandfather, her parents, her sister, and then for the whole of their marriage, Prince Phillip. On the other hand, people look at it and say, well, it's really touching, and she's 95, she's celebrating her Platinum Jubilee next year. But it's a sense of just, what's the truth of this matter? If the truth is she wasn't asked, she was told, then let's have that out there rather than an alternative narrative.
Let's move on. Meghan's father, Thomas Markle, has been talking. He was sort of reacting to the Oprah interview. Yeah,
and he's basically making this point that he thinks that Oprah has been exploitative of Prince Harry's vulnerabilities.
Do we think, you know, do we care? But also, do we think that he's a weakened man? I would say that you look at what he's saying about mental health, he would seem quite emboldened.
Yeah. I mean, I think from his own admission, he has got mental health difficulties. I did make this point, and obviously it initiated a Twitter pile-on, because you can blame the press in general for manipulating and exploiting Prince Harry the same as you can anybody on television. And there was this sense, you know, with the podcast that he's exposing a hell of a lot. Yeah. And maybe the best place to do that might have been with a shrink in a room rather than kind of to a global audience of millions. Meanwhile, you look at the Thomas Markle Sr. situation, he's still not ever met Prince Harry. He's not seen or talked to Meghan in months/years. He hasn't met either of his grandchildren. Obviously, that must be a source of great, angst and upset on both sides. But again, we look at footage of him on telly, don't we? And we sort of grimace and go, please be quiet, don't we? I think I do.
You'd want him to be.
You probably would. I mean, and are you in a position to sort of comment on the behaviour of others if you're constantly going on TV? He wasn't that critical of Meghan. He said, actually, in that interview, you know, I still really love her. But, like, in what world does he think that reaching out through television is going to attract a couple?
Maybe you do that if you've reached out in every other way.
Well, if you're desperate. Yeah. And then people can ask questions of the fact that why hasn't he still met Prince Harry, you know? It's sad, and we've all known in the last year.
Yeah, I think it's really sad.
Life's too short. Life is too short. Yeah. But anyway, it's up to them.
Well, let's celebrate something else then. Yesterday, the Queen formally welcomed Joe Biden and his wife to Windsor Castle for tea. This is GB Inc. Front and forward.
Well, the Queen is the most travelled monarch in history. Obviously, she's not been able to go anywhere in recent months, so the President and First Lady have come to her, and I think they then extended an invite for her to go to the White House when she can.
Look how fantastic she looks.
I know.
There were some great outfits this weekend as well.
And there was some wonderful imagery. So that's kind of like her greeting them. She also had a scaled-down Trooping the Colour ceremony at Windsor on the Saturday, where there's this wonderful photograph that was taken by Getty's Chris Jackson of just her in this blur of red uniforms, and it just summed up. She loves pomp and pageantry anyway. And I think with Biden, to be fair, he's criticised, isn't he, for being too old, but of course he'd probably be on the same level as the Queen, and I think he commented quite touchingly that she reminded him of his mum. And we had a bit of a kind of tetchy relationship between her and Trump.
Yeah.
Do you remember when he came over and he sort of stood in front of her? Or he just didn't seem to get the whole thing, whereas the Bidens very, very reverential. Although, of course, I remember when the Obamas came, and that special relationship between White House and Buckingham Palace was something to behold. I mean, I was there witnessing, you know, the arm going round and all that when they were showing them this display out in the staterooms at Buckingham Palace. They got on like a house on fire, so much so that the Queen invited Michelle to bring the girls on a private tour of Buckingham Palace a couple of years later. So, I mean, she's an intrinsic part of that maintaining of Anglo-American relations, and that will continue.
But also, when you've got... I mean, Cornwall was on beautiful, apart from when they arrived, and I think you couldn't see your hand in front of your face because of the fog. But then, you know, the sun came out. You've got the Queen, the leaders at the Eden Project. It's an unbelievable, sort of groundbreaking place in a beautiful county. You know, roll out the Queen a whole lot. It's like... She's,
like, so emblematic of everything that it is to be British. She was quite funny as well. I think she made a comment like, aren't we all supposed to be enjoying ourselves? You know, this sense of they're having to have some revelry and camaraderie, aren't they, on these summits, even though behind closed doors Macron is at Johnson's throat and all the rest of it. I think she's quite a leveller, really. And, of course, all of these world leaders who probably have huge egos are like rabbits in headlights when they meet HM, a 95-year-old woman sort of still knocking it out of the park. And let's not forget, it was only in April that she buried her husband. This woman is remarkable, isn't she?